GreenTech, I think, is one of the most exciting sectors, along with healthcare and crypto. I think it's one of the three most exciting sectors to be in. I think the challenge we have, and the thing I always say is, you just got to take the green bit out of it.
So less about responsibility, more about look at it through commercial eyes of change and opportunity.
China is trashing us on the green tech, by the way. At some point, they've gone, the world is going to have to buy this technology, so we're going to make sure they're all buying it from us.
We talk about climate so much in the media, but I struggle on an SME basis to sort of say, well, what should I be doing?
I think we have to listen to the people who've made their careers in studying this. If you get it, you can't unsee it. That's the phrase I get told a lot. Their warning is very simple. It's like, look, because this is unprecedented, we don't know what's going to happen, but there is a strong chance we're going to see some really negative inputs about climate change, and the amount of greenhouse gases we're releasing is doing it.
If you think things like being green, eco-friendly and net zero are just a bunch of woke crap nonsense, you're wrong. Not my words, but the words of Ben Askins, who is pretty convincing when he says that being green is one of, if not the biggest commercial opportunities of this century. We just need to get these words out of this short-term culture war and get our thinking about these subjects into the long game. And not content with taking on culture wars, we get stuck into why society can't make being a politician a terrible job with terrible pay and somehow expect to have the best and smartest people running the country, why the media, with a capital M, should stop putting political point scoring and culture war headlines on front pages and instead concentrate on stuff that's actually important, plus how social media is causing huge problems in society in general, but politics in particular. Given that Ben is proud of his very impressive 1.5 million social media followers and the content he creates, that last one is a bit odd. But you'll need to hear Ben explain why a lack of nuance is okay, as long as you're being funny. I love that. It's near the end of the episode. You could skip to it, but it might not make any sense out of context, which is kind of the point.
And we'll also be sharing key takeaways from Andy's chat with Ben throughout the show.
Hello and welcome to Business Without Bullshit. I am Andy Ory, and today we are joined by the wonderful Ben Askins. Ben has been an entrepreneur for over 10 years, and he grew his first business, Verb, a digital marketing agency for the luxury sector, think Aston Martin and Omega, into a global company based in London and New York before selling it in 2021, which got him listed in the Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2020. Today, Ben is building his new venture, Gaia, a green tech company which builds environmental SaaS products that help corporations achieve their climate goals. Ben is also one of the fastest growing social media content creators in the UK, who's amassed over 1.5 million followers across his social channels, where he talks about business, management, leadership, and working life. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's very good. Lovely CV there. Of these things, obviously the most immediate one is what you're working on now. So should we discuss that a little bit? Tell us a little bit about Gaia.
Yeah, so Gaia is a green tech company, and basically the idea behind it is, as more and more legislation around climate rules, regulations get rolled out by governments around the world, we essentially build out SaaS products and online solutions for companies kind of dealing with that disruption. So we do feel quite powerfully that there is a necessity to this environmental regulation, but there is a huge disruption to companies and businesses. And so we build out products that essentially kind of help companies, more easily manage those disruptions, as we all vaguely try and be a little bit more sensible about the climate.
It sounds like you might be or might have been in a similar place that I still am, is that, we talk about climate so much in the media, but I struggle on an SME basis, to sort of say, well, what should I be doing? There doesn't seem to be much clear information.
Yeah, I mean, green tech, I think, is one of the most exciting sectors, along with healthcare and crypto. I think it's one of the three most exciting sectors to be in. I think the challenge we have, and the thing I always say is, you just got to take the green bit out of it. Just look at this as a commercial opportunity, because I think people get the sort of philanthropic, what should I be doing, mixed up with more of the commercial opportunity that green tech brings.
Oh, so less about responsibility, more about look at it through commercial eyes of change and opportunity.
People don't love it when I say that, but I think we have to be practical in regards to, if we're going to make things a little bit better, we do need to provide some sort of commercial return on this side of thing. We can't just rely on philanthropic endeavors, basically. So my view of green tech is we should view it as a sort of commercial opportunity that happens to have the sort of benefit
How
of
is
increasing.
regulation? I mean, regulation is opportunity for your business, but is regulation opportunity for everyone?
Regulation is fine if it's consistent. The challenge we have is when governments change and people start rowing back on regulations. So it operates as any other sort of sector really, in the sense of providing their sort of consistency across, the years, and that's all fine. It's when things start getting rowed back on, there's a lack of confidence.
What are they rowing back on? Let's do some basics. My current very crap understanding of the UK requirements for climate is that large companies, so that's more than 250 employees, I think they're changing the definitions, but more than 50 million euros in turnover, because there's some European hangover, they are required to report on their footprint and stuff.
Exactly.
Below that, supply chain requirements.
Yeah,
if you supply in the NHS or big companies.
Yeah, basically. And then there's a few other things introduced in the environment law of 2021. One of the bigger ones was something called biodiversity net gain. And this basically this impacted the construction industry more than anything else, where basically the premise was if you are going to build in the country, then you have to offset and increase the biodiversity by 10%. So a new metric was brought in called biodiversity units. And the idea behind that is someone will come on a side to say, right, you're going to be doing 9 units worth of damage, for example. You need to offset 10.5, whatever.
And they pay you quite. I've heard about these. A client's doing it. They pay you quite a lot of money. Big up, Chris Howard.
The average unit is about £28,000, but it is a 30-year commitment. So what happens is a farmer or someone with a piece of land will earmark part of their land to BNG, and you get a certain amount of units depending on the current state of it and what you add to it. So it's about adding to it. So you can't just say, whereas the carbon market got a bit controversial because it was protecting, this is actually about adding. So I could have a wood, for example, and I could then add to that wood and say, I'm not going to touch that for 30 years, and that will count as a B&G unit.
So long. Okay. So effectively, I'm going to build a big nasty block of flats. Other people can then bid on there's no marketplace at the moment, is there?
There is actually, as of, nice little segue for me there. We've built a marketplace for natural assets. That's one of the first products we launched.
For natural assets. So biodiversity.
Biodiversity units primarily, but we're rolling out to carbon credits, nutrient credits and other. It's this huge, and it's one of the interesting space, and there's loads of new assets that are slowly being developed that's just slowly becoming legitimized through regulation and sort of heavy investment. But they're proper. Two of the newer ones I heard is an urban cooling token, which I've not come across before, and a waste credit, which is another one as well. So all these new asset classes are slowly being developed, and we thought actually some sort of marketplace which you can legitimize and trust from a buyer and selling perspective felt like a sensible build.
Urban cooling tokens, they must be like building green stuff in cities because it cools the city.
Exactly, yes. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that actually one of the best ways to bring city temperatures down is by building trees.
Don't Londoners or any person in Britain want temperatures up?
Yes, I think it depends. I think this is a Mediterranean one in particular.
Okay.
A lot of the Spanish cities, for example, are building down on this. But yes,
to
it's a new
reduce
one.
air conditioning use.
Exactly, yeah, and also just reduce sort of, some of these cities become pretty baking actually as climate change, slowly impacts, raises temperatures. It's one of the easier ways to try and lower the temperatures.
As a country, we're quite pro caring about, the environment. Actually, I'd sort of, we've always had very high food standards and everything like that. I mean, I do chuckle every year when they're like, due to climate change, we're expected to have the hottest summer ever. Yeah. You can hear all Brits going like,
yes, fantastic. Yeah. Might see some tennis at Wimbledon for once.
Now, let's talk about this trust element. So,
yes.
I remember back in the day, carbon credits. I know clients doing it, and it was. I don't know really what was going on, but there was a lot of sort of like people buying stuff from China and selling.
It was like the early days of crypto. It's one of the biggest cons that got away.
Yeah.
It got really abused. And the reason it got abused was because it was about protection. So carbon credits, the sort of core principle was, look, we're not going to chop those trees down. We're going to leave those not going to be chopped down. And in return, you then get to sort of release more carbon over here.
Chop
because
some other
otherwise
trees
it'd be chopped down. But then you work out sort of like, the Disney are protecting a natural forest in Virginia, which was never in hope in hell was ever going to be chopped down ever. So they would sort of say, so we're not chopping that tree down. It's like, you're not allowed to chop that tree down. So of course you're not chopping that tree down. So you're not
there not a lot of also, I don't want to blame China, but a lot of sort of other countries that no one was really checking, saying, we're doing something good.
Yeah. The lot in South Africa, there was a lot of controversy. Brazil, rainforest, there were a lot of protected rainforests,
Rainforests.
which never made the cut. So that was the big problem. And in fairness, the BNG is a really strong piece of legislation. It's actually more on, you have to add to it.
The biodiversity net gain.
Yeah, exactly, which is sort of a progression of that. You actually have to add to it. It's not like carbon, where I say you have to leave it alone. You actually have to prove you've added to it.
You've improved it. And
Exactly.
is it only UK or I do it cross-border?
Only England at the moment, but
only
UK,
England.
but EU are looking to adopt a similar scheme. So we're ahead of the game. UK can be quite proud of what they're doing in this space.
But not Scotland and Wales.
Not Scotland and Wales at this point in time. No, it's just an England-only scheme.
That's funny. Okay, because of the devolved government, they would have to enact
Do you know what? I
it.
don't know. It could be a rolling out, but for now, you can only buy them in England.
And again, you end up almost sounding like you're being racist or something, but it's more about the trust element, the culture of the sort of UK. It's much easier to verify something within your own country, isn't it? You know, you're talking about something that's in England, it's an hour away. You could pop down there, you know.
A lot of the natural biodiversity of England has been sort of slashed away for whatever reason. It's actually, if we're going to there's no point us giving that benefit to other countries in a lot. We could look at this as a global problem, or we could look at it as a country problem. And if we say, look, a lot of England has been chopped down, but don't worry, we're protecting some bits in Germany, and therefore we can chop more down in England. It doesn't make much sense. It's a national scheme to kind of reinvigorate the biodiversity in England, basically.
And I hear that I'm utterly wrong about this, but as someone who's grown up in this country, it seems about as green as it always was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A green and pleasant land. I mean, when you get people who come from overseas, they often say, God, it's very green. But apparently there is absolute,
It's a weird contrast, because we've built on shockingly little of England. I think it's about 12% coverage, which is really low for a country, really low. And so you start that, but then you actually look at what our green is, and it's all sort of we've basically got a lot of space which we're not building on and we're not doing much with. And so actually it's a kind of a nice
crappy old farmland.
Crappy old farmland, crappy old just land in general, but actually we can reinvigorate it. So it's about saying, so ecologists will come and say, right, this is what used to be a meadow, this used to be a woodland. And so it's just about encouraging that and just letting nature have it back, basically.
Is this something we have a Brexit benefit on that, finally, can we actually not just do exactly what the European Union is doing and not being in it? Because that was one of the problems. We had to follow European policy.
Yeah, I mean, it was
having a policy for Europe.
It wasn't that we were banned. It was more like they had a certain standard and we had to either match that or go above it. But in this case, we have gone above the EU, and the EU are looking to kind of copy our scheme. The 2021 Environment Act was a really strong piece of legislation, actually.
Well, it's nice to hear it. There's so many pieces of legislation. You wonder whether or not they were brilliant ideas or not. What drives you in this? Why are you doing it?
I find it a really interesting space because it's such an obviously good investment in the sort of technology in the green tech space, but it's in a fascinating sort of triumvirate of sort of politics meets commercial meets environment meets science. So I come at this very much from a tech angle. I'm sort of digital background, so I'm quite new to the green space, but it's fascinating how it's so brilliant in so many ways and just an absolute shit show in others.
When you mean it's so brilliant, the law, it's so brilliant as a subject?
It's so brilliant as an opportunity.
Right.
It's so brilliant is some of the British businesses that are being built right now in this green tech space are really cool from an energy efficiency perspective, just really great commercial investments that will have genuinely great benefits for us as a country and environment. It's just a definition of a win-win. But within that, you've got the shit show of the sort of political football that green tech's managed to wrap itself up in. You've got the sort of
we'll go stop there. What's the green tech thing that it's managed to wrap itself up in?
The best way I can think about it is energy efficiency. It gets wrapped in the sort of ULEZ, panicked, green tech, net zero, sort of political, cultural football.
It's short-termism.
It's short-termism. When people say green tech, they think you're, trying to steal their car or, all this. So, we can have an argument about that. But
or hugging a tree.
Exactly. And the way I always think about it is energy efficiency is a great example. So we added, I think, 474 gigawatts of renewable energy to the world last year, which is about 474 nuclear power stations. So a good chunk. 81% of it is cheaper than fossil fuels. So it's cheaper for us to produce.
That's fantastic.
Amazing.
Offshore wind, most
combination of solar, all the sort of renewable space. And if you were to come to an oil and said, look, I've got this new fossil fuel, it's 81% of it's going to be cheaper than this. And it actually replenishes itself as well. It's a win-win. You've got a product that just never ends. They would invest in it in a heartbeat, but because it's got this sort of anti-tag of green net zero, it's just wasting money, all that sort of stuff, it gets wrapped up in that. And so everyone goes, it's woke. And you go, it's not woke. It's just a commercial opportunity where we get cheaper energy, of which we have very little in the regard of sort of fossil fuel natural resources. So
I see. You get tarnished with the brush.
You get tarnished with the brush of this net
greenwashing and bullshit.
Just this weird, culture wars do my head in at the best of times, but this one really bugs me because I think this country is a huge opportunity, especially with Trump being, fairly anti this side of things. We've got a huge opportunity to dominate this sector. EU does get locked in and, it does sort of not help itself with weird things it does. America's quite anti. China is trashing us on the green tech, by the way. Absolutely
really?
ruining it.
Doing a really good job.
For all they just keep owning coal power plants, all that sort of, they are absolutely obliterating the world in green tech.
Because they're so forward looking. They're just like, where are we going to be in 100 years?
At some point they've gone, we're going to be, at some point the world is going to have to buy this technology, so we're going to make sure they're all buying it from us. And that's the way they sort of think about it. And so for me, I get frustrated because it's such a good commercial opportunity, but because people sort of go, oh, it sounds like it's to do with net zero, or it sounds, and by the way, I'm pro net zero. I think we all need to have a responsibility to
the net zero target for 2050, isn't it? Sorry.
Like it sort of keeps moving. But in regards to like the sort of premise of we are clearly having a negative impact on the environment and we need to move towards vaguely being more sensible about it, I'm all for that. But I do like to separate the green technology element because I think it's such a good commercial opportunity, and I think it getting dragged
we get
into
the Americans to come and, because what's always hard in this country is we're not very good at thinking big. You only need to hang out in America for a little bit and you realize you're thinking small. But it would seem if Trump's got a negative agenda, that possibly this is a good opportunity for us to sort of say,
absolutely.
Because where I see a really nice match, I've seen it a few times, is you take British science, very sweet, British scientists, well, they won't necessarily, but from these universities, I saw a load of them present in America recently, and it amused the hell out of me because they were asking for way too little money, being terribly polite about it all, and sort of didn't want to talk about money, But what the Americans have is they do spot it. They're like, look, you speak the same language, I could do this. But also they're like, this is big, and we could put 100 million into this and change America.
And they throw money hard at it. And I do like, I've had an office in America before, and it's a very different way of doing business for sure. And I do like it in a lot of ways. I agree. And heavy funding, all that sort of stuff all comes from the States. It comes with caveats and clawback equities. And, there's a lot of ways I don't like how American VCs operate.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I do think, I just think if you want to start a successful business, GreenTech is a fantastic place. And I think some of the biggest and most successful companies of the next 10 years will be in GreenTech.
And Gaia is doing a few things. So it's you thinking about the as you say, the regulatory, political, commercial angles and coming up with SaaS products to help solve these complicated problems.
For example,
marketplace.
So environment law came out about B&G units. We built a marketplace for B&G to allow...
what's B&G?
Biodiversity Net Gain.
Oh, yeah, the same one.
Exactly. So we built a marketplace to allow construction companies to easily find, not dodge it. This isn't us about saying we don't believe in the scheme. We think it's a great scheme, but it helps companies to more easily do what they need to do there. Things like more and more companies requiring to submit carbon accounting, ESG sort of audits at the end of the year. So we've got a carbon accounting software that people can use.
It takes a good guess, does it?
It sort of automates data and then uses AI to sort of generate proper reports and stuff. It's really cool, actually. I'm really pleased with that one. And then we've got a couple of other products as well that's in the pipe work. So so depending on what gets regulated, we then build a piece of software that helps people out.
And you raising money at the moment, or what's the stage?
We did a small friends and family raise, but mostly it's funded by myself and my business partner.
Okay. And your aim, over the next, where do you want to see it to go?
Do you know what? I think we want to see how, we talk about GreenTech being the best place to grow a company. We want to see if we can be a part of that. And so we're pretty ambitious of the next 5-10 years. I'm a big believer in getting it off the ground first before we raise heavy capital. One, because you might not need it, but two, I've been around for long enough to know the value of showing the worth, getting to profitability on your own. And then if you do want to go for a raise, you're just in a much more powerful position.
You got to do it. Yeah, whenever it happens to me now and then, I meet someone who's got an idea pre-revenue, pre-start, you know what I mean? And they're like, but I need to raise all this money. And they always pull up like, we've done this analysis and we think if we got 1% of the market.
Yeah. It's always 100 million by year 5. It's always 100 million.
It's an enormous number. And you're like, wait, can I get this clear? You've got no employees, no turnover, no product, no nothing.
Any advice for people starting business, if you can get something off the ground, get some usage, get some revenue in, and then go raise, I would always recommend that.
I mean, I'm just thinking in my head, it would be a bit like coming along saying, I'm a brilliant musician. I'm going to write a brilliant song. I've got this idea for a song. It's going to be brilliant. It's like, play it to me. No, I haven't written it yet. But if you put money in, it's like,
no, exactly.
What am I investing in here?
Totally agree.
But it's amazing. But the other end of that scale is the one you're saying, which if this, this is old news, but if it's a surprise to anyone to be absolutely crystal clear, it's that like, you got to get to the £1 million turnover for SaaS, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this golden grail of 10 million.
ARR and, I think people look at the wrong metrics often with companies as well. Like I think people get obsessed with I don't know, profitability gets forgotten for a weirdly long time. Like I've never understood the amount of money successful companies lose. It does bug me a little bit. It feels like a bit of a...
Well, you can't build businesses like that here. You can in America with the sort of Uber will lose $1 billion a year for 20 years.
Yeah, but at the most insane valuations, you just go, how just the bottomless pit of just raising funds, losing that money.
Those days have slightly changed, but in America, isn't it a bit like Japan beating America with various industries, car industry, but they also did it to the computer games industry. They sold Sony PlayStations at a loss on the long-term view that we're going to sell games.
It's the Deliveroo models, the DoorDashes.
They just say, although Deliveroo is British, isn't it?
It's Australian, but like there's this huge, they're all shelling money because they're all trying to win the market cap.
They're trying to win the market cap. So they're actually playing the long game of just, we've got deeper pockets than you.
Yes.
We'll beat you. I mean, I was just remembering today, we were talking about QuickBooks and I was like, anyway, it doesn't matter. But I was like, I remember when they came to meet me and it was $1 a month for like years. They were, because they got the money into it. Huge American companies say, well, how do we beat zero? Well, we offer it for basically for free and they'll never get off it. So I think it's that game. I think unfortunately or fortunately in this country, that's not really how it's going to work. To your point, you should try and make it profitable from almost day one.
But also there's so many businesses out there who will be doing 10, 15, 20, 25 mil profit you will never have heard of. Like my business partner ran a SaaS business, service desk company. He'll be the first to be incredibly boring company.
They're the best ones.
But they were doing like 40 million revenue and about 60, 70% profit.
Wow. That's why people love software though, once you get it right.
For sure. But no one would ever have heard of them. In fact, they sponsored a Premier League sort of sleeve of one of their sponsors just because they were just sort of, but no one would have heard of them. But like the ones we celebrate are they're at 400 million revenue, but they're spending 600 million just to do that. So I find I've always had issues with that type of business. I feel like we celebrate the wrong parts of companies sometimes.
Oh, well, you're reminding me of, I think he's one of Africa's richest men and he was hilarious. I remember him watching this documentary with him in a helicopter, like, how did it all start? And he's like, well, everyone wanted to be famous or a rapper or they wanted to, get into all these fancy industries. And I just noticed there was this big pile of stuff next to where our village was and said, what's that? And I said, it's gravel. And he said, well, can you sell it? And I said, oh yeah, people pay £1 or whatever kilo for gravel and whatever. And he was like, oh, I'll sell gravel. Yeah. And that's what he's like the richest guy in Africa. Just amazing. Like, simple, isn't it?
Yeah, so simple.
So what have been our key takeaways from Andy's chat with Ben so far? Here's Andy to break them down.
Number one, sustainability is a business opportunity, not just philanthropy. A lot of SMEs still see sustainability as a nice to have or moral duty rather than a smart business move. But Ben makes it clear that going green isn't just good for the planet, it's good for the bottom line. Number two, the future of business lies in natural assets. These emerging markets are becoming part of the financial system and the smartest entrepreneurs are getting ahead of the curve now. Ben explains why these assets are set to explode and how the business can position themselves to win. Number three, China is crushing the green tech race. While other countries drag their feet, China is playing the long game and absolutely smashing green technological production. They're ensuring that eventually the world has no choice but to buy from them. And Ben highlights how the UK and other nations risk falling behind by failing to see sustainability as the gold mine it truly is. So that's cool. I mean, your last experience, that was pretty good going. I think you did it in 9 years or something, didn't you? Built Verb and then got out? Something like
digital
that.
marketing company, sold it in 2021, had a 2-year earn out and then, was done at the end of 23.
It's a nice story. What happened before that? Did you have a few cock-ups or was that your first big...
First business. I was about 22. So my business partner, a guy called Chris, started at uni, just building little websites basically. And then I joined him after uni and we sort of grew it. We changed it to a sort of digital marketing agency. Quite
hard to build a digital marketing agency. It's a bit like PR to an extent.
It is, but it's the only company you can build when you're 22 because it's a service-based and you don't need a backstory. You just need a laptop and a little bit of a quick and
it's almost the realm of the young.
Yeah, so you win the work and then you deliver it. So you don't take on too much risk. You can run it incredibly low. We're uni students, so we're used to living on nothing. So actually you could keep your costs really, really low and just build out your sort of base.
Did you know a lot about digital marketing?
No. So this is actually one of the best pieces for us I can give because we couldn't do the work. We never got sucked into the trap entrepreneurs fall into where they stay in the work too long. as the founder, as the leader of the business, your job is revenue generation. And like you see the amount, for example, if creative directors start an agency or something like that, they get locked into doing the work for too long and you can't scale the business.
Oh, I see. Don't get locked in if you're the creative. They spend their time saying, "Oh, I wouldn't quite do the advert like that."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure about that.
But because we couldn't do the work, we never had that opportunity to fall into the traps. We had to hire people who could do the work, and then our job was to bring.
Why
the
the
next
hell
load
would
of
you
work.
get into it if you knew nothing about it? You just
I think
he was building a website.
he was. I mean, Chris claimed he coded. I've yet to ever see any sort of example
HTML
of
code.
Yeah, exactly. But I've also never even seen an example of when he did that. So we had, you've always got freelancers you can lean on to the design and development work. And then we started building more of the brand. We went into the luxury space. That was our sort of specialty that we went after. And the thing we did very well was just slowly leveraging the next level of clients. We started off by doing free blogs for people. And then we started to use that to start getting the early paying blogs. And then we started to slowly build in to get into small companies and slowly
people
build that
paid
out.
for blogs, did they? Yeah, I guess they paid for you to write content.
All that, everyone had like a fashion blog or a something blog. We used to do a lot of those.
It's gone now, almost completely.
Very
blogs.
gone. Yeah. Social now taking it over.
Now, meanwhile, you've gone and you're doing all this. Meanwhile, you've gone and built a sort of social media. Yeah. You're a social media brand, Ben.
Social media brand. Yeah, I know. I'm an influencer.
Personal brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Your personal brand's going really well, Ben.
Yeah.
Why?
So during my earn out, I've always been busy, but I wasn't allowed to like start other businesses during my earn out. It was a little bit restrictive. So we thought we'd start doing content. Chris and I did this together.
Chris is your business partner.
My old business partner for Verb, yeah, but we're still friends. We do a lot of content together.
Well done.
And essentially we thought we'd do that, not least because we were quite active on LinkedIn and we'd already started to see a little bit of an example of our LinkedIn profiles helping us out in our sort of business capacity, just sort of opening doors, getting intros and stuff. And so we moved into the video space. And it just took off I was really lucky. It took off really, really quickly.
What were you? This is on YouTube. You started posting.
Started posting on TikTok and Instagram, and my TikTok went first. And suddenly was getting, within 2-3 months, was getting a huge amount of views.
And what were you posting about? What was your only?
So I started doing all the sort of wanky stuff everyone always does, which is like, here's my 5 pieces of advice on how to win business.
Naked.
Yeah, yes, that didn't do as well. But we sort of did a lot of all that stuff. And then actually, someone sent me a recruitment story that they were just sort of you get DMs, and someone sent me a recruitment story, and I read that out. And everyone loved it.
Oh, recruitment story.
So it was just like an idiotic recruitment story where someone just sort of, I can't remember what the story was, but basically someone had gone to an interview, something insane had happened. I just sort of thought it was such a good story. I just read it out. It's sort of 45 seconds. And then I reacted to it. And then people absolutely loved it and got a load of views. So I started doing more of those. And then people started sharing like their worst boss stories and their worst management stories. And so I started reading those out as well. Just like exchanges of like bosses sort of, doing some hilarious stuff, but also doing some really quite shitty stuff. And it just caught I think it was a real representation of how people are feeling about work at the moment in general. But it caught an absolute wave. And, I think I got 750 million views in the first 12 months of posting.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy when you think
you
about
were
that.
naked in a bow tie.
Exactly, yeah.
While you read out the recruitment story.
That particular video got 3 views.
But they were funny, it sounds like.
They were funny. They were also outrageous. They were also relatable. I think that was the key bit. Like it was interesting that some of the stories were absolutely crazy. Like there was one where there's like a fire in the office and the boss tried to make them work through it whilst they're being put out. Like there was one where like the police came around and said, look, there's...
No, smoke's only in the ceiling right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's fine, it's hot. There was another one where there was an actual bomb scare and the police said, you got to clear out the building. And the boss said, no, you've not hit your sales quota. You're not allowed to hit your sales quota. All that sort of stuff. But actually the ones that do really well are the ones that you just go, why have you cancelled my holiday without telling me? Why have you promised me a pay rise and not given me one? Why have you contacted me on holiday? Like all the sort of...
Sorry to interrupt. Do you not feel a slight sort of... You're demonising bosses? I spend quite a lot of my time defending them because I think there's this narrative of, they're all evil and they're all about
For sure.
themselves.
And, it's something across my... I do best bosses sometimes as well. They don't do as well.
No.
But I never name people. I very deliberately don't name people. And the second thing I do is the stories I say are pretty outrageous. Do you know what I mean? I don't... And go back to one of the things we talked about earlier about context is the stories that don't work is when I go, well, this is why the boss said this, this is why the employee said that. And as soon as you try and introduce nuance, it doesn't work on social.
It's almost like when you watch those documentaries at the end, they've shown this awful boss and they would say something like 99% of bosses are not like this boss or whatever.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure that helps. I mean, I'm not sure you get to the end and they give you a stat because it's always like you've watched this thing about this terrible person and it'll just say, well, this terrible person says they paid the money back and they were really sorry.
Yeah, and it's something I'm aware of. Like I did a new series called The Best Bosses in Britain where I ask people to nominate for their best boss, then I surprise them at work with £5,000. And so I try and mitigate it and do a little bit of that, because
That's nice.
I agree
but
with
that's
you.
not so popular.
Just doesn't do as well, despite as ever with content, the more effort you put in, the less views it gets.
But that's very true with content. People say that it should be almost rugged, because it's real.
Yeah, I mean, people like negativity. Social is so set up towards anger and hatred. But it's why news is always negative, right? Because Murdoch built a business on clocking that you can monetize hatred quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it's very sad.
I mean, bad bosses is quite a funny concept anyway, because it's actually the bit that people may not know, not as in like who are listening, as in like the people, if you haven't been a boss, you don't realize how difficult it is. I mean, I always amused by people when they're like, oh, well, I wasn't trained properly or informed early enough, or I wasn't, why didn't you tell me 2 days ago that today you were going to get me to do X? And it's like, right, you have a go at my job, And it's like, I still have my job to do.
And I say this a lot, I think the hardest job in the world is running your own business. People always go, oh, Gen Z's are lazy. I say they're the most entrepreneurial generation we've ever had. So I would argue they're not lazy, and they're not, they're incredibly hardworking. So I think running your own business is the hardest job you can have. But I do think it's interesting. I do think the negativity on bosses, I'm very careful with the stories I share where they're just so obviously wrong that people can relate to it. But the thing that always happens, what I find interesting, is people start trying to guess the sector or the country it's from, and see someone will go, that's got to be the US. They go, oh no, it's definitely in construction, or it seems to be one of the few universal things we've had is everyone has had a bad boss. But I think there's a stat the other day, it's like 38% of people think they're working for their worst boss ever right now.
But these stats, I mean, who
What's the
fills
stat?
them in,
Yeah.
and who gets
Yeah.
stopped? It's like the old stats when they stop you in the street. I was like, the only person who's got time are grannies and students. So we get all this data. Grannies and, if we were like, oh, this on this poll today says that 78% of people think that, chickens are larger than houses. And it's like, what they actually mean is, grannies and students think this. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. What does everyone else think? The other, if I go a little bit in that direction, I'm very frustrated, on all of my entrepreneurial clients are absolutely losing their shit about this government at the moment and the budget and the atmosphere that's being created for entrepreneurs, that they're not workers, that they're using loopholes, that they're rich people, not and there's this real negativity amongst all this stuff, and they don't have time to have a voice.
Yeah.
And there's loads of them, and it's like, why is there not more of a voice amongst of the entrepreneurs? Every time I read the FT, they go, well, the Resolution Foundation or the Institute for Fiscal Studies say this. It's like, great. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, but they should be like a corner voice because they're way on the left, and we should have maybe some crazy people on the right. But then these stats have been blowing me away. There's no one in the cabinet who has ever run a business. I mean, do you know that? I mean, that's like, how the fuck is that even legal? Excuse my French.
I mean, I would argue that's because it's an incredibly unappealing position, a cabinet.
Who would do it?
Who on earth would do it for the role you get pretty average pay? It doesn't matter if you are the best person in the world, you'll get hated by half the population straight off the bat. And then you'll just have people you've never met who don't understand anything, who call themselves journalists. That's one of my new pet peeves, is content creators calling themselves journalists, just abusing you constantly. So you can't, and to those people like this, you can't have it both ways. You can't make it the most unappealing job in the world and then complain about it. Like you can't have it both ways. So it's a big problem.
It's impossible to fix, but it feels like, back in the day when they used to do, BBC adverts about you should do X or you should do Y. For me, and I said this so many times, but I feel like we all need a bit of education to say, you're going to have to pay these people more, be more forgiving for them. Like, I think like the Prime Minister should do like a weekly national broadcast that you can tune into or you can't tune in. They should do an hour and they should pick some subject, say, look, I know it's an uncomfortable thing and you think £150,000 is a lot, but we probably need to put Prime Minister's pay up to £1 million.
I would love to do that, but if you did an hour segment, there would be 2 clips of 6 seconds long that would then be circulated 300 million times on X.
It's the fact that no one bothers to watch. You'd have to do 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes a week.
No one watched the hour, no one watched 10 minutes, but everyone would watch the 10-second clip circulated on X within seconds.
Wow.
But we're assuming a level of like honesty in regards to having that debate. Like, politicians can't have this, going back to what we said about social, right? The problem with social, it doesn't work when you want to have an honest debate and say, here are the pros, here are the cons of this thing. You have to come out and say yay or nay, because otherwise you get clipped up and just get circulated. And you can't dispute that, because millions of people will see that clip and they'll be validating their pre-existing, what left and right, validating their thing. And so one of the big complaints a lot of journalists have now, as an actual journalist, not content creators, is they say, oh, no politician wants to have an hour's interview anymore. I go, yeah, I'm not surprised.
They know they're going to muck up. They're going to do a Prince Andrew.
But they don't even necessarily have to muck up. They just need to say something which you can clip by 5 seconds and make it sound something better. So it's not about mucking up. It's about not saying anything that you can't isolate a few words, make it sound incredibly dishonest, or crop out, different things to make it look worse than it is. And then bang. And the problem is you've got these engagement groups now. These are very organized. So there'll be engagement groups of content creators, journalists who will...
Wait, slow down. What's an engagement group?
So you'll have like WhatsApp groups where people say, right, here's the clip. Go all share it on your Twitter account.
Oh.
And that's why the same clip shared so quickly by so many people is because they're all on these WhatsApp groups, and there'll be an admin that say, right, here's the edit, go.
And these groups are organized by who? Whatever,
political, ideological, of similar minds. It depends on the platform, depends on the group, depends on the...
So we're desperate to be in tribes. We hate anyone who's not in our tribe. And previously things were simpler with only a few TV channels, and sort of almost media was boring, but in a way that it was centralist and boring and quite balanced, and you had to listen because there was nothing else to listen to.
I mean, it's making me sound quite... Because I'm in a lot of ways, I'm very pro social media. I think you get access to people you would never, ever... Incredibly amazing people with incredible knowledge about incredible things. You get access to them in a way you never would if we still had our few TV channels. So there's lots of pros to social media, but it's causing huge issues in politics, in particular, as content creators, it's causing huge issues in politics because it's so easy just to say whatever you want, and it validates a certain opinion, and it gets shared and it gets retweeted. And by the time we even remotely... I think Labour's comms have been terrible since they come into power, but they've not been as bad as everyone has said they have been.
I hate it. Weirdly, I'm so sensitive. I just hate the negativity. And I mean, my left-wing friends who think there should be more left-wing, and, and even this conversation about you on the left or the right.
I don't even know what that means. I've no idea.
Nobody knows what it means.
I have no idea where I sit on the political spectrum.
No.
I believe in market solutions, but I also believe companies shouldn't be able to do whatever the fuck they want. I thought Brexit was the stupidest thing we've ever done, but I still think, sort of investing in creating a world where people want to build businesses is... I have no idea what my political beliefs anymore is, because it's been completely ruined. So my view is I will always vote for the party I think is most central, is my wife decided.
Yeah, we're on the same page. There's such tricky problems though, aren't they? Because you sit and listen to them. So there's the good, as you say, that the people out there doing amazing content, amazing podcasts.
And monetary opportunity. You can monetize hobbies, which you could never do before.
True, you can monetize hobbies.
Which people will start loving their jobs more, which is a big thing, side hustle, all that, which I'm all for.
I hadn't thought it as simply as that you can monetize your hobby. So because I get a bit, I struggle a bit on Love the Job, because I'm like, well, who works in the abattoir? But, and although someone said to me, well, some people love working in the abattoir. Do they? I mean, they might not mind it. They might get used to it. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they're just nuts. But no, sorry, abattoir workers. I said everything wrong there. But there's no way of, what they were so brilliant at, FDR and stuff back in the day, and they get on the radio and they talk. You saw it a bit in COVID though, when it was like, we're going to war. And then we all listened to Boris for a while. And after 10 episodes, we were just like, oh, God, banging on the same old crap. But there is what I'm saying is, although there'll be all the people who clip it on the fringes, there is a desperation for truth and narrative. And it would be quite interesting. You need an almost Jordan Peterson type character who was just A, very clever, and B, not afraid, and going to consistently produce a narrative and communicate. Because the Prime Minister becomes a bit like a CEO. Your job is to effectively look after your team and have a strategy and a vision and communicate that vision. You're like raising money every week, and it should be like every fucking channel. I mean, you say people wouldn't tune in. I'd tune in to if it was 10 minutes once a week, what's going on, if they said something, if they actually got on air and said something.
A revamp of Prime Minister's questions, for example. I think that's a bit of a stale way of doing things. Maybe you could revamp that.
That's an interesting point.
I actually don't think it's particularly helpful how we do PMQs, because it's
Why?
just, I find it too aggressive. In the sense of
it's too adversarial.
Again, I think it's too much about the social. It's all about trying to get that gotcha moment, the way you can clip that 30 seconds and then post it. And so I think it was a great format for like honest debate, when people would like listen to either you listen to the whole thing or you couldn't watch it. Whereas now, because you can watch clips, it becomes too much of a,
That's what it's supposed to be about, a respectful, honest debate.
It is, but I would argue people are now doing it for the clips and the views rather than necessarily like holding them to account.
I just can't stand the political point scoring. You know, they come in, it's like, it's your fault. It's your fault. You know what I really wish, and I think, you know, Kim knew my sis and stuff, and apparently he's a very decent human being. But, you know, I kind of wish when they came in, especially when I watched Rachel Reeves' budget and stuff, that they said, look, we are where we are, okay? You know, and we're not, come on, wouldn't it be amazing? They said, I'm not going to get into blaming whether it was your fault, our fault. The truth is we've all run this government and we're all in this country together. So let's try and, you know, because that's a very interesting thing for the opposition to then respond to. If you're much more open, and because how would they respond? They would be human probably and be like, well, thank you for your nice comments, and I'm glad we're not going to get into whose fault is it. Because if you're running a business and you've got a mistake, spending hours on whose fault it is.
I know, but when you're running a business, you can fire the people who are. Do you know what I mean? You could fire the people who are talking shit about it, and
you could, but at the same time, you'd say, well, it doesn't matter who did it. We're here.
Yeah.
What do we do about
I agree,
it?
but I think we're assuming a level of honesty, and that's just not the game, right? I think the opposition is the opposition, right? So I don't mind that they're supposed to hold a company to account. So when a government makes a decision, I'm all for them saying, you said you weren't going to raise taxes. What would you call that? Like, I'm all for that. It's when they start descending into the really tedious, like, you know, just whatever, like the latest culture war nonsense is, like, you know, nothing does my head in than seeing an article about how a statue of Winston Churchill's been moved out of a room I've never been in, certainly won't be in anytime soon. Do you know what I mean? It's just, and it's like, that's the front page. Like, seriously, do you really care whether a photo's been moved from something or other? And you just go, this just can't be a problem to deal with. So one of the terms I hate most is new media, mainstream media. I find those.
What does it even mean? I find
those weird terms. So basically everyone with a Twitter account and 10,000 followers thinks they're new media and call themselves journalists, which I have a slight qualms about.
Because journalism is a.
Broadly speaking, you've got to hold yourself to a journalistic stand. If you're going to call yourself a journalist, you have to hold yourself.
Well, I think they should be regulated by an institute, like a tax advisor.
Exactly, and there should be, you know, and it's, even though I'm not saying they're great, but they do have to post. You know, they hide it, but if they make a mistake, they have to repost stuff. Sort of You don't have that on social. I mean, X is a particularly political space, so that's probably the worst.
Let's move on from it, but let's just end on the X thing. I have learned a little bit because I was just in America watching the adverts just before I was there for the election, so not on purpose, but I mean the election adverts. I mean, the only country in the world I like watching adverts is America because they are hilarious.
Not subtle, are they?
This lady will get transgender people across the border from Mexico. They were literally saying shit like this. I was just like, what? And then at the end, this broadcast has been sponsored by Donald Trump. And you're like, and then I was asking the Americans, I was like, in our country, you can't do that. That's slander. That's just outrageous. And this is free speech. We believe in it so fundamentally. And suddenly the ball dropped a little bit while some of my friends are so wound up about X that it's like, there's a level at which we think that there's free speech, and then there's just being like awful or something. But I'm up for free speech on X.
Free speech, but not freedom of consequence. That's the point, right? People want to be able to say something and then not suffer. You can't, you know, you can legally say something incredibly racist, but you can't then complain when your company fires you because it doesn't align with their brand values. And also, you can't be allowed to just lie. There has to be, at some point, there has to be some repercussions to just being blatantly lying.
It's a bit strong, but that's why we were talking just before we started, why I'm so wound up about the BBC and the Financial Times to keep talking about tax reliefs as loopholes, because it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's not true. They are not loopholes. People may misuse law, but that is illegal and it's evasion and you can go to prison for it. So, you know, I think these words, they matter so much. Yeah, you shouldn't be able to lie, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's irritating. What's been the biggest fuck up in all of this then? So you seem to have done very well. Doing very well. Things going well.
You know, you win a business 348 to 346 is a phrase I really like.
Oh,
so
I haven't heard that.
I think it was a Gary Vee quote. He said, try and win a week, 12-10 rather than 1-0. Because if you feel like you've either won or you've lost, you're going to feel pretty shit for most of your entrepreneur journey.
Oh, just throw lots of shit against the wall and try and get more.
Just try and get slightly more wins than losses over the course of the week rather than trying to either win it or not. That was a really good thing because you make so many mistakes. I mean, I was 22 when I started. Like, it's, I couldn't have known less about. We ran out of cash, even though we were a profitable business. That was a heavy learning about cash flow, and Chris is down the bank trying to,
You suddenly find his giant cigar collection in his office, you know? What's all these strippers' receipts?
We just assumed people would pay invoices on time. Like, it's just such a, do you know what I mean? Like, just
credit control's hilarious. Sometimes I say to clients, like, you see their debtors and you're like, what are you doing about credit control? Well, we don't have any credit control.
Yeah, you just, but when you just start off, you just think, well, yeah, of course. Well, they owe us the money. Of course they'll pay. You just never assume that they'll
Cheeky
start,
buggers.
or they'll kick it. Oh, sorry, we put the wrong invoice number and now it'll be next month.
Don't you think
pay.
that about people too? I always think, try and be 51% a good person. Try and be 90%, but
It's a big problem the left has is no one's perfect. Because no one's perfect, everyone's going to fall short and then they just get attacked for
Yeah, that's it. I someone explained that. The left has shot themselves in the foot because they're sort of trying to say you've got to do it. They demand perfection and therefore...
But everyone falls short. And so, you can be really good in areas and weaker in others.
Well, Elon Musk, great example, isn't he? Because he's so divisive. People hate him for what he said. But it's like, it was someone asked a guest the other day, big up Adam Pope, but he was saying, I'd be up for Elon Musk joining our government. People would be like... But I'm like, I get his point because it's like, well, I'd certainly be up for a business person being at that cabinet table. I don't think I want it to be Alan Sugar. I'd quite like it to be someone else. But if someone could be at that table going, a good CEO who's run a lot of companies saying, look, I don't want to interrupt you all, but you're talking bollocks here.
I agree, but I also recognise that government's probably pretty cumbersome and it takes a while. The first time ever my company's, I'm working with the government on a couple of things.
Yeah.
It's very slow. It's incredibly slow.
Well, it's hard enough to run 5 people.
Yeah.
I mean, when my friends who are more into the Illuminati conspiracy theories, and there's these people up the top, I'm like, it's so much more chaotic and disorganized than that. Try running a business with 60 million people.
It's where I get this whole sort of secret pulling, as no one knows.
Bollocks. There's opportunism.
For sure.
There's people who are brilliant opportunists who say, Putin and stuff's like, oh, let's move my chips.
I saw some of the COVID contracts for kit. There's a lot of opportunism out there. Yeah, but it's not this idea. This is a mastermind. It's too chaotic. It's too cumbersome. It's too tricky to do anything. It's a very, very slow moving battleship government. Like you don't. And so I always find it slightly naive when entrepreneurs say, I could just get in and turn it. It's like, no, you just couldn't.
Well, it would be like turning up at the biggest company in the world. It's like the NHS.
Yeah.
It's like, is anyone really going to sign up to really sorting it out? I mean, frankly, they need a couple of sergeant majors in there kicking some ass, and that would be helpful.
Huge. So much reform, like from a technology perspective to everything.
Great chief executives can be amazing.
100%.
If you get a really talented chief executive, because what they'll do is, people say, well, how do you achieve that much? It's like, well, you get one person, and I'm sure this is true with Elon, all these people who have a team underneath them of, say, 10 people who are all amazing. You know what I mean? And underneath them, they have 10 people who are all pretty amazing,
But it goes back to pay, right? You need to pay one of the best CEOs in the world serious money to run the NHS. What do you reckon the news would say?
Are they too scared of bringing up MPs that are going to get shitted and say, look, we need to pay everyone £1 million?
Like, I find it fascinating when like massive charities have like experienced CEOs and they pay them like 110 grand or something.
Everyone's outrageous.
It's a charity, and you go, well, but like it's a hugely complicated with massive sums of money. You need an experienced hand, and those people cost money. Like, so there's a real problem with. Like, I agree with you, like the NHS needs massive reform. And the idea would be to bring in like a gun team to do it, but they would cost a fortune.
But it would cost nothing compared to what we're losing every day. You could put together a budget and say, right, we've put aside 20 million quid. What's that for? We're going to hire 10 people.
Agreed, but it comes to an optics. Like, for example, Labour announced tomorrow we are putting a salary package together of £5 million for one of the best CEOs in the world to come in and run the NHS. What do you think the response online would be?
But they're in a position they don't have to get voted for 5 years.
There's a bravery element. I agree.
That's why I'm back to my they need the 10-minute broadcast a week and say, look, you can just listen to your sound bites. You can come and listen to me here. I am telling you, if we pay this, that will be we have to do it. We need someone of real talent. I don't give a shit if you don't agree with me. You can vote me out in 5 years, but we're going to do it. To be honest, for all of her faults, Thatcher had that I don't give a fuck. But she was a woman who'd never done, no woman had gotten that role. So she'd had to be tough as nails, to say, I don't care. Isn't that almost what Trump does a bit? Isn't that almost like the good bit of Trump that people buy into? You know, the clever business people, because there's this thing they say, look, it was the worst of two choices, or it's the least worst of two choices, and Kamala's going to grow the state and do all of this stuff. And here is someone coming in, and some of the stuff he's saying, like, I'm going to put Elon in charge of growth, and I'm going to put, you may hate the person, but it's bold and people are voting for him. That's the interesting bit.
He did really well with like the younger men. He really tapped into an audience there with the sort of
all the immigrants. Fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of like the highest share of like the black vote and the Latino votes, and he did really well. Like, and again, like a lot of the more uneducated parts of America loved him again. Like, he ran a brilliant campaign. What he was saying throughout most of it was perplexing, to say the least.
Bizarre rambles.
Like, you take any clip of him, and maybe that's the secret, right? Just if every clip's ridiculous, maybe
that's a great point.
And it's his bed of nails theory. Like, he would just say so many things. He got to the point where we just sort of go, it's no point even running it. Like, I remember I was listening to some political journalists. They just said, look, and the kid said something else. I can't remember what it was. It was particularly controversial. They just sort of said, look, we've done this before. It won't make a difference. No one will be interested in it. No one will care. And so, yeah, maybe that's the answer. You just be so controversial all the time that you can't.
There's a genius to that, actually. I mean, I think he falls into it accidentally. I listened to his thing on Lex Friedman, and you ask him a question, he just sort of rambles away.
He says anything. It's weird. It's really
goes
odd.
For a while, and he sort of changes subject, comes back.
Yeah.
Do you know what he sounds to me? Like a drunk stone guy, just rambling. There's something about him.
He's very funny as well. Like, the way he can come up with a nickname. He is like, objectively, like a lot of things he says is objectively funny. And so I kind of get the appeal in that sense. But like, when you actually sort of break it down what he says, you just sort of go, oh, that's vaguely terrifying. I can't
believe I'm saying this, and I'm sure it's completely the wrong thing to say, but actually, out of this conversation, some of the elements of what I'm looking for in the UK is to someone to come along and, yeah, that's clever on the social media. I want her to be a good person. I mean, Trump just seems to say some stuff which is just it's not British. It just doesn't seem right.
Have you seen Mega?
No, it was Mega.
Make England Great Again. Honestly, that hurt my very British soul. The idea that...
Well, first of all, don't say England.
Yes, well, exactly.
United Kingdom, I believe we live in.
Exactly. But that's the problem, main problem there. And the second thing is just like that goes such a misunderstanding of how British people respond to things. Like, Mega just sounds awful.
Let's end on our key question. What is bullshit then let's do your current industry, which is the industry of green. If we answer that, what is bullshit in that industry and why?
For me, the bullshit is the green element gets politicized way too much, and we just need to take that out and just focus on the commercial opportunity. Like, if you took the green side out and just looked at it as a genuine investment opportunity, it would do a lot better. But because it gets politicized so often, like people will do like there's an announcement for the International Business Summit where something like, 5 billion has been announced into green, like clean energy stuff. And I saw, oh, that's so woke. And you go, what? It's 5 billion from some of the most hardcore financial institutions. What do you mean? It's like, what does that even mean?
What happened at COP this year? It was a bit. I saw Martin Wolf's article today. Was it a failure or a disaster?
The problem is COP it's every 4 or 5 years is like a big one, whereas this one was a bit of a joke. I mean, the idea of Azerbaijan being.
Careful.
They were so, as in nobody, they were caught on camera.
We have a lot of Azerbaijan listeners.
They were doing a lot of oil deals, so publicly. It was and this always happens. I think people misunderstand COP. Often energy deals get struck because that's where a lot of the people are. But it was so blatant, they were just using COP for oil trades. And also the idea of Azerbaijan, who their only, it's one of their key resources in so many ways is oil. The idea that they're going to sort of be a proponent for what COP should stand for is slightly ironic.
Though, we had Greg on who was great, but, I think we demonize oil a bit too much, seeing as we rely on it, and almost everything in this room is made of oil, and we get this sort of negativity.
It's a weird thing, right? Because it's one of the biggest reasons why we advanced so far as a society, but at the same time, it's a finite resource that is legitimately contributing to climate change. And so that's the balance we have to strike at some point.
Yeah.
And it's about 97% of climate scientists now agree that
it's going down slowly. Going up, or whichever way. There's fewer and fewer that disagree.
I would argue 97% is an astonishingly high proportion in this day and age. It's day and age when the amount of people more people, for example, there's a high percentage of people who think the world's flat.
Yeah.
So at some point we have to broadly start listening to experts again. I don't know when we decide to stop doing that. But like their warning is very simple. It's like, look, we don't, because this is unprecedented. We don't know what's going to happen, but there is a strong chance we're going to see some really negative inputs about climate change and the amount of greenhouse gases we're releasing.
Do you agree with our friend of the show, Steve Keen, the rebellious economist, but his view that the government's all listening to economists who are completely trivializing the climate crisis and they need to listen to the climate people?
I think we have to listen to the people who've made their careers in studying this. So yes, obviously we need to be. I think the problem is like it sounds so bad you can't get your head around it, and that's the challenge people have, right? You can't, if you go full doomerism, we are so fucked, we're screwed. Everyone just goes la 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 la. I don't want to listen anymore. So you have to make it sound bad, but doable. Like that's the balance. But most clients have to say, look, we are in real trouble. Like we are genuinely going to have, in the next sort of 50, 60, 70 years, we are going to see astonishing change in our climate because of what we are directly doing. And you look at that and you go, that sounds quite terrifying. And like, I'm 32, I'm sort of thinking kids, grandkids, we do have a responsibility. And then I look at the sector and go, well, okay, well, win-win. Like we help sort the environment out and we invest in a much cleaner, renewable, cheaper energy. That suddenly sounds like an opportunity. So I go back and forth on climate because because of my business, I talk about it in a commercial access a lot, but I'm not a climate scientist, but the phrase I got taught, and I got taught this by farmers have told me this, really sort of range of people it is, if you get it, you can't unsee it. That's the phrase I get told a lot.
For climate change.
If you get it, you can't unsee it. If you actually understand what we're talking about, you can't not see the changes that we're having.
And farmers seeing it.
I was at in a farm in Norwich and they were talking about it. And these are not like, I think there's this perception that these are all sort of like woke scientists.
Also, there's a perception that there's seasonal variations, aren't there? It's like, they had a bad crop, but I'm going into Tesco's and it's still packed full of vegetables, so everything's all right.
It's such a misunderstanding. Like, and I was, these are farmers who have worked the land for sort of 30, 40, like they know what these are not wokey liberal scientists
Farmers
in the cities.
Farmers are not famous for their wokeness.
Do you know what I mean? They are in so many ways, but they were just saying, this is just not like what we're doing, what we can grow, what we can look like. It's just
they can grow less.
As in just grow less, but also you can grow different. Like the fact that we can now grow certain things that we couldn't grow in our climates before. Like it shows we're having such, and yet people just don't believe the science.
The quality British wine, English wine,
exactly,
should be a bit of a giveaway. Again, English people are like, bloody French,
and they go, and then you just go, but someone on Twitter will just go, but the Romans grew wine in Britain. You go, yep. It's not about like this. It's not about the climate's never changed. It's the rate it's changing is falling way outside the normal anticipation, directly linked to greenhouse gases. And
let's say that most people, which I think they do, accept that there is a crisis. And as you say, most people don't make it too extreme because it's like that's just unhelpful. We need a middle ground to tread. And then you're saying, really, look. When you see green technology companies or things trying to do technology in the green space, see them as technology and good businesses, in an area of opportunity and strip away this sort of aspect of greenwashing. And
the problem is right, at the moment, climate's all been very philanthropic in the sense of like, we should be doing, and that's a message I strongly believe in. But the problem is at some point, if we want heavy investment, if we want people to really get involved, there needs to be some sort of commercial return. And that's why I think GreenTech is such a great opportunity, because it will have the benefit we're talking about, but at the same time it's actually a commercial opportunity.
Is it biotech at the same way? Andrew Craig, a good friend of the show, is very passionate about the future of biotech as being a really great investment area. They're quite overlapping, aren't they?
Overlapping. Biotech, health tech, green tech, it's so much opportunity. And like we've got to get, I guess going back to like what we're talking about earlier about the country being a growth, like we've got to start like legislating, regulating, all that sort of stuff, but encouraging business growth, and that comes through responsible entrepreneurship, I think.
And here are our final key takeaways from Andy's chat with Ben.
Number 4, running a business is the hardest job in the world. It's fair to say that Gen Z gets a lot of slack, but Ben pushes back, arguing that actually the most entrepreneurial generation we've seen. And with 38% of workers saying they have the worst boss ever, it's no wonder so many are choosing to be their own boss instead. Number 5, climate action is being held back by politics. Too often, the green industry is dismissed as woke when in actual fact it's a massive financial opportunity. Ben makes one thing clear. If we take the politics out of the conversation and focus on the money, real progress will follow.
I'm going to ask you some quick questions. You should know the answer to them. They are nice and easy. Quick fire round. Just going to get to know you a little better. D is cueing some music. What was your first job?
It was my summer job at school, and I was working on a farm, picking onions and potatoes.
Oh, I did that as my first job. It was a nightmare.
Really, as you were outside, it was a great job.
Oh, right.
So
I got paid per pallet, though, and I never earned any money.
Oh, no, we was hourly rate. But I got promoted to tractor driving one summer and then dinged the harvester and got put back on the picker line almost instantly.
It's like, yes, no.
Yeah, moment of glory.
And don't tractors go a bit slow and combine harvesters are very large?
The problem is I had one of those massive trailers with sort of 12 tons of potatoes on. And
so you couldn't brake?
Well, no, I could brake. I just didn't even realise to reverse into it. Like, these things are so big, you just don't feel anything.
Oh, you were reversing.
I was reversing and dinged the very expensive harvester.
Oh, yeah, very good. What was your worst job?
Worst job was...
Good swimmer?
Lifeguard. I did enjoy it.
Oh, that looks like a nightmare. I ran past someone in our local
I'm a good
pool.
swimmer, but it was a pool lifeguard,
So
it wasn't like a
see him
beach
out the window
lifeguard.
in the morning, and I just think, God, that looks miserable. Very, because you have to pay attention.
Yeah, it's very
Can't
boring.
put a
if I'm being honest.
podcast on
Very
and have a bit of
boring.
a drift off.
You have to pay attention all the time and very little.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
almost
And,
like,
and obviously you don't,
come on,
you don't
drown,
want things
but
to
don't
happen,
drown,
Like nothing
you know?
ever does happen, so it's quite a
Favorite
boring
subject
job.
at school? Oh, me too.
Yeah.
What's your special skill?
History.
What's your special skill?
I think just talk about stuff I don't really know much about. I sort of had to learn that on the job in
In a knowledgeable way.
Exactly, yeah. I bet you're glad you have me here.
It's brilliant. Bullshitter, basically. Professional bullshitter.
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Archaeologist.
Did you really?
Yeah, I grew up in Greece near the ancient, so I got very inspired by
Very
ancient
dull archaeology,
civilizations.
isn't it? A lot of like, brushing dirt.
Oh yeah, I
away.
know, but you always have the eternal hope that you're going to find the next big find, so that you sort of kid yourself that.
Indiana Jones too.
Yeah, you know, I once dug up a hill when I was little in England trying to find Excalibur.
Oh wow! Did you find anything?
Didn't find it, no, sadly. I feel like we would have heard of that.
What did your parents want you to be?
I don't think they
Definitely
had
not an archaeologist.
Definitely not a content creator for sure. But I would say, yeah, I don't think they had a sort of preference in mind. I think they were.
What do they do?
One's a lawyer, one was a nurse.
Oh, nice. What's your go-to karaoke song?
I've got a very low voice. I'm also a terrible singer, so anything in that sort of.
Oh, have you got a bass? Yeah, you got a bass.
I don't. I've never been tested, but yeah. Oh, you know, be in the anything low.
I don't know. That's Leonard Cohen, isn't it? Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Office dogs, business or bullshit?
Business in a controlled circumstance. 'Cause
Controlled.
What happens if everyone has a dog and wants to bring it in?
Doesn't work.
Yeah. So,
Does it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of an office dog, but you do need to have a few rules in place. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Have you ever been fired?
No.
Well done.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that too. No.
Well, it's just, I guess, the one advantage of not ever really having a job in the sort of traditional sense has just led
You
this
didn't get
opportunity.
fired for the tractor incident.
No, but I did get relegated. I did get
demoted.
demoted. Yeah, just
Put him back on onions.
It's back on the picket line. Yeah.
What's your vice?
Gaming and sport, I would say. Online
Video
gaming.
gaming?
Yeah, online gaming.
Gambling or
No, just more like much
which
nerdier than
game?
that. Age of Empires is one of my favourites.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, building empires.
Yeah.
You know, is it? I was thinking of those games. Are they going to introduce the AI version? You can just watch someone play on your behalf.
It'd be less AI. I think it's VR is going to be the next gaming thing. I think it's going to be some real advancements there, which would be quite exciting.
Yeah.
So I've got the
okay.
Oculus at the moment, which is quite fun, but I think
It's quite fun. I've played that with. Have you done the Darth Vader one? And Darth Vader comes up to you.
No.
Oh my god! And you think, oh, there's Darth Vader, and he comes up to you and you're like, I'm sorry, Darth.
Yeah,
You're
honestly,
like,
some of them are.
so scary.
I played a zombie one, and like you have a flashlight and a gun, and then I dropped my flashlight, and I'm sort of scrambling around. I can see these things sort of like. It's honestly,
Your brain's only getting so many information.
No,
They have to go to fix the floor thing. Like I did the boxing thing with my friend in COVID with the Oculus, and I really punched it. I mean, I only did break the kitchen cabinet, but I still got a scar on my hand from it. You know, and I was like, he's like, you all right? And I was like,
they'll have moving tracks soon and stuff. They'll be
I
like,
saw one today with it sort of like it looked amazing.
yeah,
That's what
I
you
think
need.
this will be very exciting.
Any top tips for founders, entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll always be someone to tell you why it won't work. And very few people will tell you why it will. And then ironically, when it does work, they'll still say, oh, that's so obvious. Like it was such an obvious thing. You'll be so lucky. So I think just trust yourself and get on with it, basically. And your job is always to drive revenue. And it's always focus on growth. Never get yourself locked into doing
drive profit, drive revenue. You mean just focus on growing?
I would argue, drive revenue. I think any founder who finds himself like focusing too much on operational or delivery, I think you're going to struggle to scale at the level you want.
You mean profitable revenue?
Yes.
Yeah. You're not saying, oh, don't worry about profit. Just get your revenue up.
God, no.
Yeah. Don't get caught up in operations.
Yeah, don't get caught. Like your focus should always be, hire the people to do your current job so you can go on to do the next one.
Ben, you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for coming to do this.
I really enjoyed it.
So there you have it. That was this week's episode of Business Without Bullshit. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Romeo. We'll be back next Wednesday. Until then, it's ciao.